Okay, welcome everybody to the MACC Policy Board meeting, October 24, 2016, at the Holland City Hall. We'll start out with introductions and just start out from my right here. Sorry.
Jim Story, Allegan County.
Howard Bauman, Port Sheldon Township.
Met Camp, Zealand Township.
Todd Walters, Olive Township.
Ken DeWeer.
Fillmore Township.
Terry Hoffmeyer, Laketown Township.
David Van Hoven at large.
John Lano, Michigan Public Transportation, Lansing. Tom Bird, Ottawa Road Commission.
Seven Plains Cruise, City of Zealand.
Skip Keeter, Park Township.
Nancy DeBoer, City of Holland.
Terry Nienhuis, Holland Township.
Joe Bauman, Ottawa County. Russ Casal, Max Authority Board.
Blaine Copes, the MAC.
Steve Boltites, Executive Director of the MAC.
Pankaj Rajatouch with the MACC, and got some folks back there.
Kelly Howard with the MACC. Lisa Husswater, also with the MACC. I'm Sue Harder, I'm with the City of Holland Community and Neighborhood Services Department. Welcome.
Welcome.
Ed Steele, Sheriff Laketown.
Carolyn Alstead from the MACC.
One more.
Gary Anzier, Holland resident.
Welcome, and thank you for attending today. I think Steve mentioned it, these microphones in front of you have a little flashing thing. If it's on green, that's the only time I think your voice will be picked up or recorded. So to the extent that we can keep it on green, it's probably good. So we have our minutes from the last meeting that are in here, and I just want to open it up to see if there's any questions or a motion to approve.
I move that they be approved.
Okay, Terry, one second. Russ? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Public comments. Any comments from the public? I think we've got maybe one or two folks. Nothing? Okay, thanks. All right, so our first item on the agenda is the Macatawa Watershed Project. And I believe Kelly will kick us off on that.
Yeah, so I've got a couple reminders first. One, there was a memo in your packet about the next Watershed Advisory Committee meeting. It is this Thursday at 1:30, and we wanted to draw attention to that meeting because we will be presenting the results of the Sustainable Funding Study that was just completed by public sector consultants. This was part of our Regional Prosperity Initiative project that was funded by the West Michigan Prosperity Alliance, where we formed the West Michigan Watershed Collaborative, working with 25 groups now, I think, watershed groups in the 13-county West Michigan Prosperity Alliance to look at what our common goals and needs are as watershed groups, and then also taking it that step further to look at what are the sustainable funding options. So overall, we've been very pleased with the work that public sector consultants did. We were pleased with that final report. They gave a presentation to our Watershed Collaborative last week up in Muskegon at the Annis Water Resources Institute. So we have a copy of their presentation, and that's what will be presented this Thursday at the Watershed Advisory Committee meeting. And so that will be at the Howard Miller Library in Zealand at 1:30. Again, it was in your packet. All of you should have also received an email from me as well. And I would appreciate an RSVP if you can just send me a quick email or let me know today, just so we can make sure we have the room set up for enough people, because we would anticipate kind of a larger turnout for this meeting than our meetings typically are. So any questions about the meeting? Okay. I think we will present a very abridged version of that at a future policy committee meeting. the original presentation was probably about 45 minutes, so we'll cut it down a bit for the meeting on Thursday, and then when we bring it to this group, we will trim it down even further and kind of give you the executive summary. So the other thing that I wanted to just mention briefly, there was a little save the date card in your packet as well for the watershed annual meeting, which will be in December 15. It will be here in the council chambers. And so we will have the Hope student research presentations again this year. The Advanced Environmental Seminar class last year was not held in the fall. It's being held again in the fall. So there's 2 groups of students doing some research currently. And then we'll have other monitoring updates and Project Clarity, and we'll give our Stakeholder of the Year award. So for now, it's just to save the date. We will certainly send more details and an official invitation at a later date. So then the other topic that we wanted to just kind of touch on briefly today, kind of a little watershed educational moment, if you will, is just to talk briefly about cover crops. There's been a lot of activity in the watershed lately with farmers planting cover crops. This is the time of year that they are doing that. So hopefully you're seeing some of that activity as you drive around the rural areas. So we thought it was important to just kind of do a review of cover crops at this time. So our number one reason for promoting cover crops is for the prevention of erosion. But there's a whole host of other benefits that farmers will kind of evaluate their needs and pick the appropriate species to get these other benefits from them. So I'm not going to read that whole list, but basically with those other benefits provided by cover crops, they can end up paying for themselves in what the farmers get back, especially in the crops that are really good at scavenging nitrogen, because that means the farmer doesn't have to pay to put nitrogen fertilizer on their soil. The cover crops are doing some of that work for them. Another huge benefit of some cover crops is that they can help break up compaction in the soil, where they would typically use tillage to do that, and we don't want them to use tillage because that soil disturbance is going to increase the likelihood of erosion. So on the one picture there, kind of in the bottom middle, is a picture of a tillage radish. So it has a very long root structure that can penetrate into the soil and break up that compaction. And then some of the other benefits from having that and then other root structures is that it helps to build the soil. Those roots are not harvested. They remain in the soil typically. So as they decompose, they're adding organic matter, they're adding water holding capacity, all these things that build healthy soils to produce healthy crops, but then also that will help to retain water, increase infiltration, and reduce that surface runoff, which is what causes erosion. And then we do have some farmers that are using cover crops for some other benefits, including forage. We've got one farmer in the area that is a sheep farmer, so he's using his cover crops as a way to allow his sheep to forage. He's not harvesting it, he's putting his sheep out in the field to eat it right in the field. And then we do have a farmer that is transitioning to organic. So he is growing his own cover crop seed. He bought the first batch of seed because it's very expensive to get organic seeds. And then he's growing that, it's organic oats. He's growing it as a crop so he can harvest the seed and then use that in the future to plant cover crops. So we have farmers using cover crops in the watershed for all of these reasons. And I did want to share some numbers with you as far as the scale of implementation in the watershed. So with our 2 grant programs, the Great Lakes Commission grant, we're just wrapping that up now. So we do have some farmers that are still implementing cover crops under that grant. In total, we've had 865 acres applied under that grant, 814 this year. So within the grant contracts, some farmers just did single-year contracts, some did multi-year. So those 814 acres, they're not all multi-year contracts, but 814 this year. And then the GLRI grant, this is the first year of that grant, so an additional 380 acres are being implemented this year in the GLRI grant. And those two grants both focus on the same geographic areas of the Upper MACC, which is a good majority of Zeeland Township, Peters Creek, which is mostly Overijssel Township, and then North Branch, which is kind of the west half of Fillmore Township. So those are those grant eligible acres. So then beyond the two grants, Project Clarity is also funding cover crops. So another 1,800 acres have been planted under Project Clarity. Probably about half of those were last year, half were this year. And there have been just funding single year requests at this point. With the GLRI grant, those 389 acres, I think only 54 of those were a single year, and the rest will be a multi-year contract through the grant. And the idea with having multi-year contracts is that the farmer will hopefully see that benefit of planting those cover crops for the 3 years that we can pay for under the grant, that they will continue doing it on their own. There's going to be some variation in the appropriateness of planting cover crops based on where they are in their rotation. So there's a lot of variability out there, but really the point I wanted to illustrate is there's a lot of acres that are being treated with cover crops. And those are just the ones that we're helping to fund. There are certainly additional ones out there. And then I should maybe mention the pictures here. So another thing that Project Clarity was able to do that we can't do under the grants are support the purchase of equipment. So these two pieces of equipment shown in the picture on the left is a Pennsylvania interseeder that Project Clarity paid for 65% of the cost of that equipment for a farmer in Zeeland Township. So that allows him to plant, as the picture shows, plant that cover crop seed into the standing corn. And that typically happens late July, early August, before it gets too big. And then on the picture on the right is a different type of an interseeder. It's a Hagee interseeder that's just an attachment that's put onto the tractor. And that one will allow the seed to be planted later in the season, even as late as the September. We had the farmer that has that equipment. Project Clarity also paid 65% of that cost. He was planting some cover crops with that equipment into October even this year. Or late September. Yeah.
The whole cover crop concept, is that quite common amongst area farmers?
And if it is, can you give me some more examples or have some more examples about what a common cover crop might be?
Oh, okay, species. It's becoming more popular. It has not been. And I think some of the reasons are that it's extra work for the farmer. So it costs money. There's extra fuel and labor, equipment costs into planting a cover crop. And also, it has to be done in the fall. So that means you can't till the field in the fall. So it's getting farmers to change their management practices too. So it's only going to work into a rotation where a farmer has already switched over to spring tillage or no-till.
Well, see, that picture indicates that's corn, right?
Right.
And it's not very high.
Yep.
If he's planting the cover crop seed now and he harvests the corn, how does that happen as far as he doesn't in other words, what happens to the cover
Right.
crop? Hasn't that grown then?
Yes. Yes.
I'm learning
and-
a lot about farming here today.
Old McDonald.
Yep, yeah, and the benefit with having the cover crop interseeded in between the growing rows of corn is that it has a chance to become established before that crop is harvested. And there's certainly going to be some damage when the crop is harvested, but it's green growth on the ground. So even if it does die, there's still that plant matter there that's protecting the soil surface. It's not all gonna die. I mean, I've got some pictures of some of the actual crops. I haven't been out to take pictures of cover crops post-harvest yet, but we'll try to do that yet this fall. And a lot of what they're planting in between corn is rye, cereal rye. some winter wheat as well. And those are two species that can be planted later. So you could plant a lot more if you interseed it, because there's a it's called the Midwest Cover Crop Council. They have a website that has this cover crop species selector, and it's a really awesome tool that shows you a chart of the different species and what's the window that you can plant them in, because some you have to get in the ground much earlier so they have a chance to grow before frost. The rye and the winter wheat, they can grow under cooler conditions, so you can plant them later, even into late October, early November in some cases. Where other species, things like tillage radish is being used in some areas, that has to be planted earlier, or it's just not gonna survive. You have to get enough top growth so you get that root growth, and then there needs to be enough of it there that it will kill over the winter. And that's another kind of complicating factor, is that you have to get that cover crop killed before you plant your next season's cash crop. So there's advantages to planting rye because you can plant it later, it grows really quickly, but it's hard to kill. So, each farmer has to kind of weigh their options and figure out what works best in their operation. And that's what we're trying to help them figure out, provide them that technical assistance, also private consultants in the watershed, the conservation district staff, the MEP technicians. There's a lot of resources, MSU Extension, and then this Midwest Cover Crop website has been extremely useful for that. But a lot of it just has to do with they're planting late in the season, so they need to do that rye or winter wheat. And that's, I think, almost solely what we're seeing this winter. So these are some actual pictures of cover crops from this year. And the laser pointer doesn't work on the TV monitor. So on the upper right, that is annual rye interseeded into corn, and that was in August. That was taken when we did the farm tour in early August, so that one of those actually all of the farmers on the farm tour were participating in our programs and planting cover crops. So that one was taken shortly after it was planted. The picture on the upper right is with that other interseeder that was planted later. So there's quite a bit more growth on that. And that was planted in mid-September, and I think I was out there 2 weeks ago. So that was a few weeks of growth, and it's doing quite well. The weather this fall has certainly helped with allowing the cover crops to grow as warm as it's been. The bottom left is a little bit harder to see, but if you get up there close, you can see a little green in that picture. That one is the organic oats that, and that's rye, but that one's organic oats. So those were planted, and I checked them, I think, within maybe 10 days after they were planted, so they hadn't had much time to grow yet. So those will get quite a bit bigger before we get a real hard frost. And then the lower right picture, that is a field of tillage radish. That is actually, it's on the corner of 16th Adams and, is it 84th that goes to the Upper MACC natural area. So it's a very visible corner. It's a great stand of tillage radish that was planted after wheat harvest, just a small 5-acre piece. So that's a great example of a cover crop that's getting great coverage. And that was, again, planted after wheat, so like in August. So it's doing a great job protecting that soil there. And then that is a field that will be used for forage for animals, too. Yeah, Nancy.
Again, I'm urban girl, so do they make money on these cover crops? I've never heard of a handful of tillage radish.
Nope, because the kind of by definition, a cover crop is a crop that's planted between cash crops that's not harvested. There are certain species that you could harvest. So like this tillage radish, that leafy green on the surface could be harvested for forage for animals. or you can put your animals out there and feed it. Some could be, you could harvest the seed for the grain. Again, depending on the species, there's a whole host of species you could plant to harvest grain, but by and far, more cover crops are planted just for the erosion control or the soil building properties. They're not planted to be harvested.
Wasn't that the genius of George Washington Carver, that they were gonna rotate crops instead of just doing tobacco? They introduced peanuts as a
Right.
way to replace the nutrients in the soil and all of that. But then they had all these peanuts and everybody said, what in the world are you gonna do with that? And so he came up with 400 uses that have been very great ways to use peanuts.
Right.
So I think it'd be a great way to incentivize farmers if we could figure out a way to use cover crops that they're profitable, besides being good for the soil and good for, the
Right.
ultimate yield of your cash crop. But I'm just talking about things I don't know, so,
Right.
but that's just, yeah, I'm just an urban girl, so.
Yeah. Well, and there are definitely farmers out there that are kind of being innovative and trying new things. It tends to be the smaller operations. Some of the larger farms that are farming, thousands of acres, they're just doing the standard, put in the winter rye or the winter wheat, kill it in the spring, plant their cash crop. But some of the smaller farms are trying to be a little more innovative in how they use the cover crops. And so yeah, and I think it's kind of exciting that that's happening here.
Yeah.
Some of it is of their own initiative, and then we're able to provide them some of that financial incentive to try some new things.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, Glenn.
The further north you get, the more problems you're gonna have with this seasonal growth things too.
Right.
Down south, they're doing this all the time. We just don't do it up here all the time. But those radishes, you can put that in clay, and in about anywhere from 6 to
Yeah.
8 years, it'll almost be loose enough soil that you can just use it for many other things that you couldn't originally, so. That's farm talk, Steve.
Most of the farms, right after harvest, especially corn, they, what they call is, their heavy equipment is chisel plowing it in. The stalk is going into the soil right away rather than the cover crop. You see very few corn stalks through the winter anymore. They're all blended into the soil right after harvest.
Yep. Yeah, so the more cover crops we have planted, the less of that we'll see.
Any more questions for Kelly? Is that it?
Yeah, well, thank you.
Okay. Well,
Excellent
thank you for all your
questions.
work. Appreciate it. And next up, Lisa will bring us up to speed on the updates in the transportation program.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will be reporting on non-motorized transportation. Each month we try and give you a little variety, so this month we'll be providing different updates on projects that are happening throughout West Michigan. First of all, I wanted to let you know that Green Commute Week, as you know, we've had for nearly 10 years now. We've celebrated that event in May, and in October we promoted a school challenge, which thankfully we had 1,300 elementary students participate, and what you see on the screen is one of the winning schools. I believe that was Vanderbilt Academy. And it's something that we were able to promote as part of Safe Routes to School, encouraging students to walk and bike to school. And Lakewood Elementary was the first place winner with, I believe, 70% of their students participating. So only 30% of the students arrived to school with parents dropping them off at school, we were very pleased to see that. Vanderbilt, and I believe it was Holland Heights Elementary, tied for second place. And the third place winner was Pine Ridge, which is a Holland Christian school. So we were delighted. 2 of those schools were brand new. They thought the concept was wonderful, and they were excited. Each of the students that participated received a green clip-on LED light, so they're visible as they're walking to school. And what we love about this photograph here is that this was a donation from a local business that provided safety vests for the students. And I went to deliver the LED light prizes, and the students were still wearing them following the event. So they're very excited about walking to school. And again, what this is, it's another event that helps people to think about the choices they make and to consider alternative ways to arrive to your destination. And walking and biking, as we know, is very good for health. And it's actually a lot easier than waiting in the carpool lane in that school, I discovered. So highly recommended. All right, so that's the school challenge, and you'll hear more about school challenge in the spring during Green Commute Week, which will be in May. The second item I wanted to let you know, as a follow-up, last month I told you about a grant application we've been working on with the City of Holland, and this is the Big Jump Grant application, which is 3 years, and the full amount is $250,000, so we're really working hard to do the best we can and submit that application this week. So MACC staff has been offering technical assistance, but it's actually the City of Holland that will be taking the lead on that. And one of the elements of this application that I wanted to share with you all today is that the City of Holland, if you didn't know, has a bike video, a website, well actually it's a web page on safety and safety education. And they're providing these resources to the community at the same time as putting paint down on a number of different facilities in the city to alert people to bike lanes, how to use bike lanes, how to pass a cyclist safely who's on a bike lane. So it's another step to educate the community, but I thought this was a great example to share with you. And yeah, we expect that this is something that will certainly improve safety and be able to work well with our regional bicycle network. November 1st, if you could mark your calendars, you have all received an invitation on the table. This is another collaborative activity where the Macatawa Area Coordinating Council staff has been serving on a pedestrian and bicycle advisory committee that the Michigan Department of Transportation has been hosting. They are now in the process of putting together a regional non-motorized plan, and this is an outreach meeting, an opportunity to come to the Herrick District Library just next door, provide some comments, and MDOT will be using this information to look at where the regional connections are, identifying any gaps, and establish priorities. Very important when we're talking about policy, and tied with that will be funding. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware that this is happening very soon, and it's from 4 to 7 on November 1st. So we look forward to this opportunity because, as you know, the MACC adopted the regional non-motorized plan in 2014, and this public input opportunity will help us directly. We're in the process of updating our plan as well. So it's a great opportunity, and I'd like to encourage you to share it with the community. And then, as part of this conversation, this was a perfect example of addressing gaps in our non-motorized network. Steve Boltice gets credit for these photographs, but we used these during our tech committee, and I just thought this was a great illustration of, throughout our community, there are locations where a cyclist or a pedestrian literally stops at the grass. And so this was a great project in the City of Zeeland, completed this year, the Fairview Avenue Pathway construction. And I just wanted to share that with you because as part of the planning process, we need to know about opportunities to improve connections and improve safety for all in the community. So thank you to the City of Zeeland for working on this project. And that is all that I have for you today. So are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Lisa?
Lisa, was that, maybe Ken, done with the help of our TAP program, our Transportation Alternatives Program funding.
That was actually a CMAC.
Oh, was it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Updates from?
Well, there are not any new major initiatives, a lot of continuing initiatives, I guess, that are very important that we're kind of working on behind the scenes, one of which is the performance measures, the federal performance measures that I'm sure you've all heard about over the last couple of years. But there was, just about a month or so ago, there was a federally hosted workshop that brought together all of the MPOs around the state to kind of begin looking at how the performance measures will be implemented through the state and to the MPOs. I think Steve and Elisa were there at that workshop. And, I thought it went well. It's just, I think we're just kind of anticipating, well, what's the follow-up, what will occur from now through the implementation of the performance measures. So that's kind of ongoing, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that in the future, in the coming months. At the state level, and this is kind of behind the scenes administrative work too, where we're changing our amendment, TIP amendment process. When agencies submit projects, up until just a few months ago, that was all done just using just Excel spreadsheets, just kind of a manual operation. And so there's been an interim period where we've used what's called an E-STIP system, which is sort of automated, but now the state, our MDOT, is going to adopt what's called a JobNet system, which is basically a web-based cloud service, so that when staff submit TIP amendments, it'll go through that process. It's supposed to be more efficient, will allow quicker reviews and more timely approvals because it'll be submitted online. Staff at MDOT will see them immediately, the projects, and they can be sent to the FHWA and the FTA for approval, basically shortly thereafter, or almost immediately. So hopefully TIP amendments will occur a lot smoother, more efficiently, and faster. Hopefully.
We hope.
Any governmental automated system, you have to be patient with, obviously, but I'm sure there'll be hiccups along the way, maybe, but hopefully things will go smoothly.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I don't have any project updates. I guess our region people aren't here, so I guess that's all I have.
Well, the big news that came out of the Muskegon TSC is that on the US 31 project, the intent was to switch traffic back over to the northbound lanes last night, and I did not get a chance to get out there this morning.
It did.
They were able to get it?
They were Sunday already, they're on the northbound lane.
Okay, yeah, so they Saturday night, right?
TVA reported today that it wasn't done. It was supposed to happen tonight.
No,
We have an eyewitness.
It's done, but my understanding from MDOT is the turn lanes, of course, to gain access to the opposite side of the highways will be closed yet for this week yet.
Okay, maybe
Till the
that's.
second, they're supposed to be paving all through the week here at night, so.
Right. Southbound's gonna get one more course.
Right.
Yep,
So,
yeah.
Well, what's been the feeling locally about how the project has progressed? Mostly satisfied, or?
Are you asking if we complain about good things? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think you just have to be aware of the implications and not being able to make left turns and right turns and plan accordingly.
It made our secondary roads awfully busy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, well, I've certainly noticed that myself, actually, coming to meetings here, 120th has been a nightmare, it seems like.
Prefer to go down the highway with the construction than take 120 up.
Me too.
That was quite easy. Have to watch your turns.
Yeah.
Yep,
That's not the only
I
thing.
stayed on 31.
I did too.
Now, if Holland Township would get 136 back open, we'd be really happy.
We're working on it. That was Allen Township's version of 9th Street.
That was worse than 9th Street Drive.
Oh,
It's beautiful going north now. Gorgeous. It is, yeah. It'll be worth it, and everybody will
Twilight Zone.
be very thankful.
it does look nice. Well, thank you, John, and we'll move to the next agenda item, and I think that Steve will talk a little bit about the community enhancement program, maybe a little bit background, and then what we're proposing today.
That's right. This, as the agenda indicates, this was sent out under separate cover. You should have received it in an email from me about the middle of last week. If you did not receive that, there is a copy of it, the same thing, at your place setting as well. So if you had a chance to take a look at that cover memo, I first brought to you a draft of what we call the Community Enhancement Program Framework at the March board meeting. And that was the culmination of a lot of work by the MACC Service Delivery Committee. And that group has a number of different topics that they keep an eye on. And one of them was broadly regional funding for regional assets. And what came out of the conversation around that particular topic, regional funding for regional assets, was what we're now calling the Community Enhancement Program. And as the cover memo indicates, the CEP is what the acronym for the program is founded on the belief that there are assets that provide a regional benefit and are deserving of regional support. Thus, the primary purpose of the CEP is to support efforts that serve public purposes or common good and have an enduring positive effect on the quality of life and economic vitality of the greater Holland Zealand community. So, at that March meeting, you gave an endorsement of the framework, and that really enabled staff then to continue the journey with those units of government who wanted to continue kind of refining the framework process, and they have done that. And so what was sent out to you and what you have before you today is actually version 5 of the framework. And a lot of the components of it remain the same. The most substantial change was to the funding formula, which can be found there on page 3. And as the title at the top of it indicates, we went through 8 different options, the committee did, before we landed at a formula that we could get agreement on. And so the components of that funding formula are different than the ones that you saw back on March 8. And if you had a chance to take a look at it, it has several components that go into this funding formula, including a population component, a base figure component, a component related to taxable value, and then a component related to taxing ability. So the inputs into the funding formula changed a little bit, and certainly also the target amount. The version of the framework that you saw back in March had a target amount of $100,000. As the participants worked through the final draft of the framework here, we said, let's look at reducing that to $50,000. And then if you had a chance to take a look at it, there is the assumption that the group or the MACC will then, if this is approved, take this into the community, talk to other regional entities like the Chamber, like the Community Foundation of Holland Zealand, as well as to the private sector, and say, we've collectively come together, raised this pot of money, and we're hoping to leverage that and get matching support for some of the activities that we want to undertake. So that is certainly, the funding formula is certainly the largest change to the document since the last time that you saw that. The Service Delivery Committee and the participants working on this met this past Wednesday, and arrived at a place where they felt that they could support this and endorse this. So one of the things that you noted in the cover memo is that the Service Delivery Committee members took action endorsing the framework and are recommending that you endorse the framework as well. And as the memo indicates, the endorsement by the policy board essentially commits the MACC to the following: that we will provide the administrative functions, including organizing the meetings of the group, maintaining records, as well as the fiduciary responsibilities, which would include collecting, holding, and then distributing the funds as directed by the CEP group as outlined in the framework. So endorsement for the MACC is undertaking those administrative and fiduciary responsibilities. So any questions regarding the program itself as well as the first motion? And then I'll move on to the second motion that's being proposed as well. But let me stop there first and just walk us through it. We talked about it quite a bit at the March meeting. I don't want to pause and see if anybody had any questions regarding the framework and what the MACC's commitment would be in terms of through endorsement of it.
What is your first motion?
That would be for the policy board endorse the framework, which commits the MACC to being the, taking care of the administrative functions of the group as well as the fiduciary functions of the group.
And then the second motion?
So then the second motion that was included in the cover memo, so as the Service Delivery Committee was putting together the document, we talked about the reality that the MACC faces and that we have our members have 4 different fiscal years. Some of you are on a January 1 start, some of you are on an April 1st, some of you are on a July 1st, and some of you are on an October 1st. And so whenever we undertake an initiative like this that has a funding component to it, and we notice this with the Project Clarity, once there's approval by the group and we're moving forward with implementation, it can take a year or longer for each of the participants to budget the funding and then allocate the funding to it. So it takes quite a while. And the group was saying, well, if we're gonna kick this off, we'd like to get it rolling sooner than a year from now. So the suggestion and the other recommendation that's come forward is to allocate $25,000 from the MACC reserves to seed the CEP so that it can begin its work early next year. While we go through the rest of the process of getting approvals and allocations from those entities that are going to participate. So it would just allow the group to kind of a kickstart and get it rolling.
So is this really just moving funds within our own budget then?
What actually would be coming, wouldn't be coming from the budget, it'd be coming out of the MACC reserves.
Right, but it's going to fund activities off the MACC in support of the program.
Right, yep. Now, in that regard, those allocations, I mean, you would make the decision whether we're gonna allocate the reserves or not. But if you had a chance to review the framework again, there is gonna be a board that is developed that is gonna operate the CEP. It's not gonna be this entity that's gonna be doing that.
And eventually the funding for that will come from,
Right, this is kind of a one-time to seed it or to prime the pump, to get it rolling, while the various participants who agree to participate go through their budgeting process and then make their allocations that way, which we learned takes about a year when we start something.
Question? Are you going to consider the 2 issues separately or combined?
Right, so there are 2 separate motions here. And my thought was that they'd be handled separately.
okay. I guess what I'd like to do then, if it's okay, if we have discussed the program and the support for it, and I'm not on the Service Delivery Committee anymore, so I don't know all the details, but if somebody would like to make a motion to support the program, then maybe we can put that on the floor.
Because I was unable to make the meeting last Wednesday. Is there an opportunity through the process that if you don't want to participate, you can pull out?
Right, so what would happen here today is, as I mentioned back in March, or described, this process has basically been following how the MAC's Transit Authority was put together. So it started out with a MAC-based committee taking a look at things, putting together a framework, bringing it back, getting the endorsement of this group saying, yep, we think it, has merit. MAC staff continue on facilitating and supporting the work of the committee to bring it to the next stage. And essentially, this has now arrived at the next stage. So pending your approval today, then the various participants who came this far in the journey, it goes back to each of their boards or councils and says, okay, it's gone from the Service Delivery Committee, it's gone through the Policy Board, now it goes to each of your organizations, whether you're gonna participate based on the framework that has been developed here. So then, then we'll see how those approvals go and move forward based on who approves it, so.
Because we had a lengthy discussion about it at our board meeting last week.
Okay.
And the board is not very happy with some of the results that they feel that's happening here, so. So that we might refer to just go back, not do it, so. I'm just gonna let you know that now.
With this formula, we're not part of it at this time. Like I said several months ago, if there's a project that comes up, we'd look at it case by case basis.
We haven't forgotten that.
But this formula here, is that per year for the units that are choosing to be part of this today?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, there was substantial private money that started this process off. Am I correct in that?
Well, actually, I mean, the Service Delivery Committee came about as a result of the Future Search a few years back.
That's what I'm referring to.
Right, yeah, and there was substantial private investment in that particular event. But there hasn't been financial support of the Service Delivery Committee.
No.
Although,
That was for Project Clarity, right?
yeah, although one member of the Service Delivery Committee was previously Greg Holcomb, and it's currently Phil Meyer. And the idea there was to maintain, that liaison between the Service Delivery Committee and the private sector. And I know Greg Holcomb just left our community recently, but, he was very involved in this while we were working on it. And, he thought, yes, if the participants are able to come together and demonstrate that, there can be agreement on something like this, he thought that there'd be a good chance of attracting some private sector support for this as well. And certainly, it's the intent, as the document states, to leverage this funding.
So, Steve, if,
There's 7 participants here. And as Glenn mentioned, one drops out or one doesn't want to participate or do whatever, if you don't get full participation, you go back and what do you do about the formula? Or, you just start over then, or how does that work? You just go with the ones who have agreed to?
Yeah, my recommendation, this is option 8 of the funding formula. So I would say whoever participates, they would participate at what is shown here. And then down the road, we could talk about adjustments to that if we felt it wasn't generating enough or, wanted to make other adjustments. But I think at this point, we would send it out the way it's been put together.
Steve, at this time, is that goal to maintain the $50,000 that we're talking about now? Because at one point, they talked about $100,000. And, are you looking at to really expand those numbers considerably, or just keep it at that $50,000?
Right, so as I was mentioning earlier, when you saw this back in March, it was $100,000, as a place to start. But the feedback that came back from the participants who said, hey, we'll go to the next step was, that's too rich for our blood. So Then we cut it down to 50,000, and that was much more palatable to the participants that were, so that's the number we're running with is, you know, the target amount now is 50 grand.
So the goal is to show the private sector that government can work together and shine a light on the regional assets that really develop the industry and the population base of the region.
Right. Yeah.
And if we can show that, they come with support,
Well,
matching or whatever, we don't know.
We hope so.
Yeah.
We think our case is much stronger with the larger number of participants involved, certainly. Because, you know, I think one thing that did come out of the future search is there is some skepticism among other sectors of our community on the ability of a large number. I mean, I hasten to add when I say something like this that, you know, when I talk to those folks, when they're talking about a specific unit of government where their business is located or where their residence is located, they feel very good. They feel that all of you run, you know, very efficient organizations. They don't feel that there's any problems there. But there is skepticism about the ability of several of us to come together on one particular thing. Now, I remind them, you know, we've allocated, you know, tens of millions of dollars over time.
Yeah.
But that stuff doesn't tend to make the papers as much in that nature. So we do a lot of the work we've done here, you know, fireworks, watershed project, we do a lot of things collaboratively. So we need to continue, and it's the MAC's responsibility to continue to put out front to those other sectors of the community that we're working together. But I have encountered a fair amount of skepticism, I would say, about the ability of several members to come together on any particular effort.
Well, we, Holland Charter Township has supported this concept pretty much all along, and like many of us seated here, we support many of these organizations through appropriations and contracts that we have through them. There is, and again, I'd support it, but there is a feeling out there is when there's a gap in funding with these organizations, is it government's place to fill in that gap? And that's another whole issue here.
You know, if I'm a business and I'm looking at the greater Holland area or MACC area coordinating council, and I'm trying to recruit quality employees, one of my big selling points is quality of life within that community. And if there's something that they physically can point to an employee and say, this is how your municipalities are working together to enhance the quality of life in the greater Holland area, I think that there's a point there as far as recruiting employees. I know I've talked to many of them, and they have a difficult time recruiting employees because just of not only this, but, you know, the quality of life that we all enjoy here. You know, the great public safety pieces here, Holland Hospital. It all comes into play when you're looking as a possible future employee of a business of whether you want to be there or not. And, you know, I think this myself reflects that quality of life that as a employee, I'd be looking towards.
They just had the over 70 awards through the Encore Rest Haven thing.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the people honored, I think it was Jane Armstrong. I hadn't met her before, but she has brought 100 physicians to this area. And I said, how do you do that? And she said, I bring them here and I try to show them the quality of life that we have here. I take them downtown, present what it means to live in this area, why even if the salary isn't the same, you're going to want to locate your family here.
Right.
And that's a huge, huge part of corporate development is selling employees and their families that this is a place to invest and put your roots down. You don't have to always want to leave to the next highest position. This is a good place to land. And I'm going to repeat the story I heard at the mayor's conference with, they had the Oklahoma City mayor there, and he said they were trying to get this huge business to locate in their city. They did everything they could, and they were in the top 4, felt very promising about their chances and didn't get it. So he was so consumed with that he traveled to Chicago and went to the office of the CEO of that company and said, "Can you please tell me why we lost out?" And it took a while, but the guy finally said, "We sent some middle management people to your area. They stayed downtown. There was nothing going on. They didn't like the love. They said, we don't want to live there." And so they didn't locate that whole business there. So the regional assets, the kind of quality of life we present are huge in the development of business and the development of our whole area.
Motion to accept it, or?
Yeah, well, I would say at this point, the 2 motions that, are included there would be, at this point, could be brought forward. The first one is a motion to endorse the Community Enhancement Program framework. And as I mentioned earlier, endorsement by this group means you commit the MACC in terms of staff to do the administrative and fiduciary responsibilities. That's what endorsement means in that regard.
Do the participants have to still get board approval for these dues then?
Yeah. Yeah, the Service Delivery Committee felt that it was best to start here.
Okay.
See if it gets approved, and then if this board approves it, then move forward
Okay.
to the other participants.
Okay, so we make a motion to approve it with the understanding that members may have to still
Right, they would
get
still have to take.
approval and may come back with changes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, can I get a motion to at least support this? I think we've looked at it a few times in the past. And Nancy make a very good point about improving the quality of life, which ultimately, hopefully, is more taxpayers too.
So moved.
Okay, Terry, second?
Second.
Question?
Yep, sorry, go ahead.
I don't really have a dog in this fight as a transportation member, and I've wrestled with the appropriateness of my weighing in on an issue that is really an issue between the units of government. I endorse the concept. I think it's what we should be doing as a community, but as a transportation member, I don't see where I would be a participant in that particular venture. So I would like to abstain from voting on that. We've had discussions about how we, various members, participate in the actions of MACC, and I think it would be appropriate in a case like this for me as a transportation member to not vote on something that is more important to you who have a vested interest in it as units of government. I do, however, have a question about a second motion concerning funding, and I'll reserve my comments for that.
Well, the only thing I would say is quality of roads probably is a big part of quality of life too, so, and obviously play a role in that to some extent.
But these are exactly the discussions we had, and we're having, I think, in the bylaws piece. I mean, as it is currently stands, you are correct.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that that's not gonna change when the bylaws change.
Okay.
So I understand what you're saying.
So we have a motion to approve, a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? No.
You could probably note MDOT as an abstention as well.
Okay.
Because I thought the same thing as the discussion was taking place,
Yeah.
that I was not going to say aye or nay either way.
Yep.
So.
Sounds good, thank you.
From my own standpoint, I hope that changes in the bylaws. I mean, transportation is, it's such an integral part of what we do here.
Well, sure, and as Tom mentioned, it sounds like a good discussion and a good program, and I personally would support it if I had it, if I was involved in it at the local level back in Lansing, let's say, in my jurisdiction or the area that I live in, certainly I would support it.
Okay.
But
Fair enough. So Steve, maybe you can talk a little bit again about the 25,000 and the timeline before when the other funds might kick in then.
Right, so as we, kind of thought about a little bit the implementation issues, we said, okay, I mean, this is a program that's going to be allocating dollars towards different either events or, the various things that it could be used for, might be bricks and mortar type of thing, activities. Since that is a major focus of the group, they need to have some funding to get started. But I feel, and others felt the same way, that we're in a much, much stronger position in going to our partners and seeking funding if we can say, we've come together, we have this funding, will you match it? It's kind of tough to go to them and say, well, we approved this program, it doesn't have any funding, but it will over the course of the next year. Would you consider contributing? Whereas if we can walk in the door, this was actually a suggestion that came from Greg Holcomb, and said, hey, you're gonna be in a much better position for fundraising if you can say you have some dollars and then ask for a match, frame it in that way. So it was out of those conversations where they said, we should seek some funding for that. The MACC reserves are about $660,000 right now. If you took a look at the financial report, there's gonna be an addition to that as a result of this fiscal year. So, the 25,000 is certainly a small percentage of our current reserves. And we believe that it'll help prime the pump and help us with fundraising activities. So that's the reasoning behind the 25,000.
Well, those reserves go up and down, like some of those unspent reserves, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you see our audit, of course, we do have some, obligations.
Obligations,
And,
yeah.
I mean, some
Just so they don't think we've got
compensated.
660,000
Yeah,
of extra money
compensated,
sitting there.
right. But I mean, our
Yeah,
obligations are less than $100,000.
okay.
Is this gonna be just considered a one-way, so once it goes in, it's always there, or is this a loan that once this fund gets established, that it goes back into the fund again?
So the thinking on this is it's a one-time, not to be repaid. This is just to kind of be a kickstart. Yep.
And not come back year after year asking for.
No, it's a
Well,
one-time thing, but it's not a loan either. It's a
But
one-time.
that's my question, is it a loan where, after they get the
Right,
fund
yeah.
established, does it come back? Because right now, you're potentially using funds from people that aren't gonna be participating in it, that's my question.
Right, yeah. No, it's intended to be a one-time, but not on a loan. It's money that's put in there.
I'll raise my question now. The transportation partners contribute about 13% of general money for dues. And as an agency that has limited resources and has been fighting to try to accomplish its public mission with inadequate funds, we look at every dollar we spend to try to make sure it fits into priorities of need and allocation. I have some questions about dues that we as a road commission have paid to the MACC, contributing to, in some way, towards reserves. I don't know what percentage, I don't know that we keep track of that, being used for something that is not transportation related. And it gets back to some of the issues we've been discussing in the workshop. And had we had more time today, I would have brought it up in the workshop. I looked through the bylaws and the master agreement for the MACC. The bulk of our reason for existence is transportation related. We're established as an NPO to administer the federal highway funds that are given to us as federal aid, and to make sure that it goes for the designated silos that come with that funding. I think it's wise that the founders of the MACC established a vision for cooperating between units of government on projects of common good. The newsletter that went out says that our mission is to encourage cooperation between neighboring government on issues of area-wide concern. That's a noble mission. The bulk of what we do has been transportation related, but we've expanded it to include other areas such as Project Clarity. And as a road commission, I look at that and say, yeah, I'm contributing water to the watershed, water that runs off the road that I'm responsible for handling, that's winding up in Lake MACC, and it's probably consistent that some of the dues that we pay go towards addressing those downstream issues. I don't know that this particular project is one that we have a responsibility to fund, and I would be a lot more comfortable if we could consider it a loan towards the units of government as seed money to get the project going, and then as the money is acquired, it would be paid back to the MACC, and that avoids the issue of efficacy.
Who will the members of that program be as far as a board, like the contributors?
Right, so, yeah, as the framework says that those entities that approve it are to appoint a member to the board. So it'll be the participants that are contributing that will be making the funding decisions. Howard.
Yeah, just, several months ago, we decided that we didn't want to be part of that at the time. But if a project came up, that we would look at anything that maybe affected or really benefited Port Sheldon, we'd look at it project by project. We weren't saying no to the CEP in particular, but we want to look at it as case by case. The $25,000 consideration, I mentioned it upstairs. We're looking at a due increase by members. And you do a little math, if we increase these dues, it equals more than the 25,000. Because we weren't choosing to be part of it at the time, I'm not real interested in our dues. Port Sheldon's dues right now being put in as seed money for this. I'm not opposed to the group. I'm not opposed to the Service Delivery Committee. I was part of it for a long time. And another thing, how many years have we been working on this? First with Future Search, a few years with the Service Area Delivery Committee, and then a little longer past that. If it takes a little longer to get that money in there, this thing has been a several-year process to begin with.
Well, I guess let me give another position here.
I look at this whole thing as for the common good. In other words, there are if you look at the list that these funds will be going to, there are some in there. There are some on that list that Holland Charter Township would not necessarily give to, but we realize that being a part of this, again, that they established merit to be on there in the first place. They went through a vetting process here, to some degree, in my understanding. So I guess, we look at it as being part of the common good. In other words, it's an easy phrase to use, but it's hard to ignore all of the work that's been done here and the weighing that they did as far as what should be on the list and what shouldn't be. So I guess what I'm saying is I would support the $25,000 seed money.
I think there's some kind of donor fatigue that people get asked all the time, here's another envelope, here's another evening soiree where you're going to fill out your little coupon or your little card on the table. And so I do think that the philanthropic the vision of our region, which is amazing and unbelievable. So I think whatever we can do to make their process a little smoother and show them that we are willing to work together. None of us get everything we want, but overall, we are building a better region, and we care about attracting, retaining, and developing talent because we care about our businesses. And we know that you have to have regional assets in order to do that. So, I mean, it is, like you said, seed money, like a mustard seed money. If you divide it up into the little tiny percentages of what someone has given from a particular organization in that pot of money, to just say, you know, this is a little tiny thing that we're giving, but it's a huge principle. The huge principle is we believe in this region. We want it to be an economic, vital part of this area. And the businesses are saying, we are having trouble. You've got to attract people here. You've got to retain them. You've got to develop that talent, or we're not going to make it. That's 70% of the businesses are looking for talent. And the quality of life we present is huge to that. Huge. So I know, so if we can just kind of go to a little higher level of common good, the best for the full region, I think the philanthropic community is going to say, great, we've been waiting for this. Like you say, it's taken years and years and years and years to get to this point, but if we can kind of keep going that same direction, it charts a positive future. Nobody can get along anywhere in the nation now. Let's be different. Let's be a group that can get together and work out our differences and not all agree, but still we go to a higher level that unity is the most important.
Yeah. And just as an average citizen, I will say this area is blessed to have a pretty good working relationship between the local units of government.
Absolutely.
And if you ever talked to Randy Thalen when he was here, he had worked with folks that were on the other side of the state, and he says a total 9-day difference.
Right. Yeah.
And I
it's
guess I don't
huge.
know what the process would be, but is this something we shouldn't possibly bring before the boards? And I was gonna mention too, put our numbers together so I can put it before our board so you can have a formal vote on it, number one. You know, whether our board wants to participate or not. Find out how many people are gonna participate, and after we got that participation number, say, okay, you got a pretty good conglomeration here, take a look at it, and then decide whether it is a $25,000 donation into it, or is it a loan? You know, and you put it off till next month on this part of it. Till you get through all the boards or whatever it takes.
So, I mean, we're assuming at this point that, you know, the participants who accepted the invitation back in March are the ones who are moving forward with taking it to their boards and councils at this point. And right, I mean, I think the committee is, hey, we've taken this through 5 iterations and move forward. I would imagine, you know, if there's only a remnant left of what's shown here afterwards, you know, they'll have to make a decision about what they want to do, if it makes sense, if there's critical mass or not, to move forward. But I think that from the committee's perspective, they said, you know, we've put together something that we think makes sense, and, you know, it is a journey, just like with the transit. You know, we started out with 3, and we said, we'll take it at this point, and, you know, fortunately, all 3 did eventually join the authority as well, so.
The MACC.
Yeah, that's right, but you're right, I mean, if,
You have the framework and approved already now, correct?
well,
Did we, yeah, we approved the
Yeah.
framework?
yeah, so the framework's been endorsed, so now we're talking about whether we
Now
want to
it's
do
the
that
funding part of it.
allocation, right?
And maybe it's like I said, a 2-step process where we, you know, put it back before the boards. It's just my thoughts. I'll leave
Yeah.
it there, so.
But I just want to just say one thing that Mayor DeBoer mentioned of how everybody gets along and does this. What we really ran into at our meeting here last week was the fact of, we've given over 1,000 acres of land to all the projects that go on in Ottawa County. somebody said, are we gonna get 5 cents for George Woods, because we wanna start making that into what we feel is something important too? There's not one thing in there that says Zealand Township in it. And we give figure it out, at $5,000 to $10,000 an acre, and you give away 1,000 acres. Where's our money in this? Because we were pretty much for it originally, we talked.
Yeah.
And, after looking at what happened, that's one of the reasons that and I think I feel a little bit like what, Howard does and what we can do. If there's something that's worth it, we'll do it, but otherwise, we're probably willing to just back out on it.
Yeah, but, once this framework is put together, I don't think anybody's saying these are the items that it's restricted to at this
Right.
time.
Yeah, in
I
fact,
mean,
there's
it'd be a living thing, hopefully, in the future.
right. So if Bill were still sitting around this table, he and I talked a lot about this as it was going through its formation. And, Bill was a big proponent of including some specific assets in it, because he said as soon as, he can speak from experience, as soon as a pot of money is created, you're gonna have lots of people interested in it. In fact, I've already had people approach me who've heard about this already and have talked about items not on this list. So he had said, he was a big advocate of saying, hey, we should define some things. But you will notice in the verbiage that it does leave the door open for the group to look at unforeseen opportunities.
Right.
So something may come along that, wasn't envisioned. I wouldn't guess that the group would probably do that right out of the gate. I would encourage them to look at something that actually touches as many of you as possible as a first allocation. But that was, part of the rationale for putting in there is to provide some focus and framework, but we left some wiggle room in there with that phrase, that the board does have the option to look at other things that come forward. But they are gonna have to be, just like our transportation funding, we don't have Petal Holland or another advocacy group come and say, hey, we think you should do this project, and we wanna put our project in the ring. It has to come from one of the participants. Kevin's.
Oh,
I think we have to look at it, not how it is going to help our community, but how, I think it's been said before, how it's gonna help us in a whole. A lot of people that live in Zealand Township, they might not have a lot of things on here, but they all enjoy Lake Michigan. It has on here harbor dredging, which is I think is a big thing for this area, harbor dredging. The New Groningen Schoolhouse is in there. I'm sure township residents would enjoy that. So it's not just what's in your community, it's what's your community members enjoy as a whole.
right.
There's another aspect to this that unless you're part of the process, you don't see it. But if you're going for grants, whether it's to redo one of these projects or whatever, and you can on your grant application, come up with a document that says these people are working together in this arena, that holds a lot of weight with those grant reviewers. I mean, when they rate these grants, they're looking for cooperation, collaboration, and this type of thing here. Because I know when I was still with the city of Holland and was busy writing the community-oriented policing grant in Weed and Seed, if you remember the good old Weed and Seed. The reason that we came out on top of that was because we could show the collaboration not only from law enforcement, but from the community the community organizations, the banks, the social organizations. That's what really brought that granting opportunity to us, because we as a community can show that we're doing that. And that's what this does. That brings another piece to that puzzle. So you can't look at just this. And, I mean, some of these grants are pretty substantial. If I remember that Weed and Seed grant, that was That was close to $1 million over a 4-year period or something like that.
Yeah, a couple of transportation examples kind of along that same line is that, you know, the area put in, I think we put in $75,000 and convinced MDOT to put the loop ramp in at M40 and 196. And they were very impressed that we were willing to take part of our CMAC funding, our money, and put it into a state, you know, trunk line. Also, I can talk with one of the grant reviewers when Laketown Township went for a state grant to put in their pathway. We put in $100 grand. I mean, that project was over, I think it ended up being, you know, several $100,000. You know, we were less than 25%, our contribution, but they said, oh yeah, when we saw that the MPO put some of their skin into it, that moved your application on. So there are a couple examples when the collective group got behind one particular entity's.
Well, you don't even have to look that far, you just look at US 31. That doesn't travel through all of the member organizations here. It doesn't travel through the city of Zeeland. It doesn't travel through, well, Fillmore Township it does. But, I mean, that, again, is that piece that the entire region is going to benefit from that, even though it's some of the municipalities and so forth aren't connected directly to US 31.
And I really can say that about, you know, all the TIP projects. I mean, how much did we put into Zeeland Township's non-motorized path on 64th? I think we were in for about 300, the CMAC funding for that. A little over 300, something like that. Yeah, not everyone is gonna use that non-motorized path on 64th, but it closed a gap. It was a great project. It created a loop. It created access to the Upper MACC Parkway, so we said we're behind it. We had already put considerable funds in non-motorized bridge over 196, not as much as Hamilton Township ended up putting in.
Okay,
Nice
So it's-
bridge.
But, you know, now we had a loop. I happened just to do that loop this past, you know, weekend.
so being that I'm the guy supposed to be in charge of the meeting, I'm just kidding. And you've all been very good about staying beyond what we were
Yes.
hoping to get you out by 12:45.
That was our target.
You know, I understand there's differences, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We'll always have slightly different points of view, but just so that we can get you back, I'd like to entertain a motion for the 25 to be taken from the MACC reserves to seat the CEP. If somebody would like to make a motion, I'll take it.
I'll make that motion.
There.
I'll second it.
Sec-
Skip.
Skip. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
3, 4? Okay. Motion passes?
Yep.
Okay. All right, and, what else is on the agenda? Monthly financial report?
Yeah, we didn't have an executive committee meeting this past month, so there was no report from them, but the financial report was included in the agenda packet. As I alluded to earlier, this does reflect how things shook out for FY16. So it's certainly unaudited at this point, but I think it's a fairly accurate representation of where we're going to end up. Revenues came in about $803,000, almost $804,000. Expenses at about $727,000. So there was a balance of revenue over expenditures this particular year. And you can see that most of that gain came out of the watershed program and the indirect expense portions of the budget. So be happy to answer any questions regarding that.
All right, then Nancy, if you want to share some comments about City of Holland and exciting things going on.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming. Glad to have you here. We just had our vote on the Civic Center last week Wednesday, so we are go for the project. And we put the investment in the lot itself into the building in order to have a footprint for the engineers to certify for the conservation energy bonds. So we're very excited about that, but we are still working hard for philanthropic involvement to be able to do the parking lots and all the exterior on the farmer's market parts. We're excited about the bridge to the township with Windmill Island Gardens. That is going well, and that should be happening. The Holland Board of Public Works, of course, has their ribbon cutting in June, but actually gets online full tilt the middle of February. So they are busy doing the snow melting, new loop, cleaning out all the water. So we'll have a much more controlled water that's doing the snow melting. It won't be coming out of the lake all the time, so it'll be clean and should be even a better way to do snow melt. And we're finishing up the snow melt on Central Avenue, should be done by winter. So that'll be exciting to see that working. And we just finished the Michigan Municipal Electric Association conference. They had historic attendance, 215 instead of the usual around 150. They all took a field trip out to the plant. I think that was a big draw for that group. They're excited about that because power is a huge challenge across the country and across Michigan. We're going to be hosting the Michigan Economic Development Association next year in August. So that will be a great opportunity to show people all over the state what is going on in this region. We're excited about that. And then in September, we'll be hosting the Michigan Municipal League. That's never been hosted here either. And so we'll be bringing in councils and city staff from all over the state to be able to see what is going on in this region as well. So those are important opportunities to showcase. We've sent out invitations to the neighboring cities and municipalities so that they can be a part of the planning for the Michigan Municipal League. And we're excited to roll out the red carpet to bring people back. So a lot of exciting things going on, and glad you could come, and sorry it went late.
Where's the conference, the MML Council conference going to be?
Downtown Holland.
I-
Yeah, the keynote will be at the Jack H. Miller at Hope. And then I think registrations are going to head Hayworth Inn. And they'll also be staying out at the Hampton and Holiday Inn. There was a big thing that they're doing, New Holland is doing that same weekend at Courtyard by Marriott. So they're using all three hotels downtown and then the others as well. So it could be anywhere from 300 to 700 people coming in.
And that's June typically, right? What is that memo?
That will be in September,
Oh, it's
Usually in the fall.
yeah. They have a Lansing one in March, maybe you're thinking about. So, yeah, a lot of good things, and thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to talk about hard things.
Yes, thank you.
It's like family reunions, sometimes you just get into stuff that nobody wants to go to, and it touches people's buttons and all of that, but it's healthy.
Yeah.
So, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Don't eat turkey here today.
No, that's right.
Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. And if nobody has any objections, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Any opposed? No? Okay, we're good.